My name is Nestor. I'm 32, and I never thought buying my dream apartment would turn my family against me. After years of saving every penny, I finally had my own place in Boston. Then came my birthday party, where my parents called me selfish, threw cake in my face, and screamed that I was dead to them all because I wouldn't hand my apartment over to my sister Rebecca. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Before I tell you how this family nightmare unfolded, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how I turned this family disaster into the wake-up call they never expected. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. From the age of 10, I was expected to look after Rebecca, who's 4 years younger than me. Our parents made it clear that protecting her was my job. When she broke Mom's favorite vase at 9, I was scolded for not watching her closely enough. When she failed math in 7th grade, I had to tutor her instead of joining the architecture club I'd been excited about. This pattern continued throughout our childhood, with my needs consistently taking a back seat to hers. Our parents weren't terrible people. They provided for us, supported our education, and in their own way, loved us both. But there was always this unspoken hierarchy. Rebecca's happiness came first. If we both needed something, she got priority. If I achieved something, it was expected. If she accomplished half as much, it was celebrated twice as hard. I still remember my high school graduation. I was valedictorian, and my parents clapped politely during my speech. 2 weeks later, Rebecca simply passed her sophomore year with average grades, and they threw her a party complete with catered food and a DJ. When I asked about the disparity, my mother simply said, "Rebecca needs more encouragement than you do, Nestor. You've always been the strong one." That phrase, "you're the strong one," became the justification for a lifetime of unequal treatment. Despite this, I worked hard. I earned a partial scholarship to study architecture at Boston University, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. While my parents paid Rebecca's full tuition at a private liberal arts college, which she dropped out of after 3 semesters, I worked 2 jobs alongside my studies. Monday to Friday, I attended classes. Evenings, I waited tables at a restaurant near campus. Weekends, I worked at a hardware store, learning about building materials that would later help my career. Sleep became a luxury. Some nights I got only 4 hours before dragging myself to morning lectures. My roommates partied and enjoyed the college experience while I calculated tips and scrubbed tables. But I had a dream becoming an architect and owning my own place in the city I'd fallen in love with. After graduation, I joined a mid-sized architectural firm. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but I lived frugally, sharing an apartment with 3 others to save money. Meanwhile, Rebecca bounced between jobs, retail, administrative work, even a brief stint as a yoga instructor, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months. Each time she quit or got fired, our parents covered her rent until she found something new. When I was 28, an opportunity arose at work. One of the senior architects was retiring, and I'd impressed the partners with my dedication and creativity. They promoted me, along with a substantial raise. Instead of upgrading my lifestyle, I continued living with roommates and put every extra dollar toward my apartment fund. Last year, it finally happened. I found a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in a renovated brownstone, walking distance from the Charles River. The large windows allowed sunlight to pour in, illuminating hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot. The kitchen wasn't huge, but it had new appliances and enough counter space for me to indulge my weekend cooking hobby. The 2nd bedroom would become my home office, where I could work on freelance projects. The day I signed the mortgage papers was the proudest moment of my life. No one had given me this. I'd earned it through years of sacrifice and hard work. I spent weekends painting walls, replacing fixtures, and making the space truly mine. I carefully selected furniture that would last, investing in quality pieces rather than temporary solutions. By the time I was finished, my apartment had become my sanctuary. Meanwhile, Rebecca's life continued its chaotic pattern. She moved in with a boyfriend, then out again when they broke up 3 months later. She maxed out credit cards, buying designer clothes, and taking weekend trips to New York. When collection agencies started calling, our parents bailed her out, claiming she's still finding herself. At 31, Rebecca was still finding herself while I had built a stable career and home. I didn't resent her, she was my sister, and despite everything, I loved her. But I had stopped enabling her years ago, which created tension whenever family gatherings occurred. 2 months ago, Rebecca's latest relationship imploded. She'd been living with a guy named Tyler for almost a year, a record by her standards. They rented an expensive apartment they could barely afford, even with both incomes. When Tyler left, Rebecca couldn't make rent. She called our parents, expecting another bailout, but something unexpected happened. They suggested she ask Nestor for help. That was when the pressure began. Initially, it seemed like they were just asking me to help her find an affordable place, or perhaps lend her money for a security deposit. I was willing to do that much. But as the conversations continued, their true expectations emerged. They didn't want me to help Rebecca find a place, they wanted me to give her mine. "You have 2 bedrooms," my mother pointed out during a Sunday call. "You only need 1. Rebecca needs somewhere to stay. Temporarily," my father added, though his tone lacked conviction. I tried explaining that my second bedroom wasn't empty. It was my office, essential for my freelance work that supplemented my income. I offered alternatives. I could help Rebecca with her apartment search, act as a reference, even loan her money for a deposit. "Why are you being so selfish?" my mother asked, her disappointment clear through the phone. "She's your sister." That word selfish would become a recurring theme in the weeks to come. The first direct confrontation happened on a Tuesday evening. I just returned from work, mentally exhausted after a long client meeting, when my doorbell rang. Opening the door revealed Rebecca, eyes red from crying, 2 large suitcases beside her. "Surprise," she said with a weak smile. "Can I crash here for a bit?" I invited her in, made coffee, and listened as she explained her situation. Her version painted Tyler as the villain who abandoned her, conveniently omitting their frequent arguments about her spending habits that I'd heard about from our cousins. As she spoke, I noticed her eyes darting around my apartment, assessing the space as if already deciding where her things would go. "I was thinking," she said, stirring her coffee, "your office could easily fit a bed. You don't really need a whole room just for a desk, right?" The presumption stunned me. "Rebecca, you're welcome to stay for a few days while we figure out a plan for you, but this isn't a permanent solution." Her expression hardened. "Mom and Dad thought you'd be more helpful. I am being helpful. I'll help you find your own place, maybe in my neighborhood if you want. There are some affordable studios a few blocks away." She dismissed this with a wave. "Those tiny places? Come on, Nestor. You know I need more space than that. Remember when we shared a room as kids? You always let me have the bigger half." That was true because our parents had insisted on it. But this wasn't about childhood room arrangements. This was my home, purchased with years of sacrifice. "I've already started looking at apartments," I told her. "Tomorrow we can call about some listings I found." She stayed that night on my couch, and the next morning, I showed her several rental options within her budget. Each one was met with complaints. Too small, too far from downtown, too old, bad lighting. By the afternoon, her true intentions were clear. She didn't want any apartment. She wanted mine. That evening, my phone exploded with messages. My parents called 3 times, each conversation more pressuring than the last. Aunts and uncles texted their unsolicited opinions. Even my cousin Michael, who normally stayed out of family drama, sent a message suggesting I step up for family. Rebecca had been busy, spreading her version of events. Selfish Nestor, with his big apartment, refusing to help his homeless sister. The narrative conveniently omitted the multiple alternatives I'd offered. The pressure escalated over the next few days. Rebecca stayed on my couch, sighing dramatically whenever I passed through the living room, making comments about how the office would make such a cute bedroom. She took long showers, used my groceries without asking, and invited friends over without permission, all while making no effort to find her own place. At work, my concentration suffered. I missed deadlines and had to apologize to my team. My boss, Sandra, noticed my distraction and called me into her office. "Whatever's going on, Nestor, you need to handle it. Your work is slipping." I couldn't afford to lose focus on my career. That evening, I called my best friend Marcus for advice. Unlike my family, Marcus had seen my journey firsthand, from the exhausting college jobs to the years of saving. "They're manipulating you," he said bluntly after I explained the situation. "Your sister is 31, not 16. She's responsible for her own housing." "But she's family," I said, echoing the phrase my parents kept repeating. "Yes, and family should support each other, not exploit each other." Supporting Rebecca means helping her become independent, not enabling her dependence. That conversation with Marcus clarified things. I wasn't being selfish. I was refusing to be manipulated. The next morning, I told Rebecca she had 2 weeks to find her own place. I would help with her search and could loan her money for a deposit, but she would not be moving into my office. She didn't take it well. Tears, accusations, reminders of how I'd abandoned her during various childhood incidents that I remembered very differently. When emotional manipulation didn't work, she switched tactics. "Fine," she said coldly. "I'll tell Mom and Dad you've made your decision." The implied threat was clear, and it worked as intended. For the next week, my parents' disappointment arrived in daily phone calls. My father questioned whether my career success had changed me, made me forget family values. My mother was more direct. "After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I found myself mentally cataloging what exactly they had done for me compared to Rebecca. My college had been mostly self-funded, my apartment entirely so. My career built through my own hard work. The inequality of their expectations became increasingly apparent. Meanwhile, Rebecca continued her campaign with extended family. Aunt Judith called to remind me that family sticks together. Uncle Paul suggested I was being stubborn. Cousins I barely spoke to suddenly had opinions on my housing situation. The pressure was becoming unbearable. I started avoiding family calls and developed anxiety whenever my phone rang. Sleep became difficult. I would lie awake rehearsing arguments and justifications. My chest felt tight with stress, and I developed a persistent headache. But something else was happening too. With each unreasonable demand, the pattern became clearer. This wasn't about helping Rebecca. It was about maintaining the family dynamic that had always existed. Nestor sacrifices, Rebecca receives, parents approve. For the first time, I was disrupting that pattern, and the entire system was responding with increasing pressure to force me back into compliance. The breaking point came when I discovered Rebecca had been going through my personal papers. I returned from work early due to a canceled meeting and found her in my office, looking through my mortgage documents. "What are you doing?" I asked, startling her. She didn't even look embarrassed. "Just trying to understand your financial situation better. Mom and Dad think you could easily afford to rent another place while letting me stay here." The invasion of privacy stunned me. "That's none of your business. And for the record, I can't afford that, nor should I have to. You need to find your own place, Rebecca. This has gone too far." She stormed out, and within an hour, my mother called, berating me for upsetting Rebecca. The manipulation was so transparent now that I could almost admire its efficiency. Rebecca creates a problem. Rebecca becomes the victim. Nestor becomes the villain. Parents intervene to protect Rebecca. That night, I received a text from my father. "Family dinner this Saturday. Your mother's cooking your favorites. Be there at 6. Important family matters to discuss." I knew exactly what important family matters meant, but I agreed to attend. This conflict needed resolution, one way or another. Saturday arrived with a sense of impending confrontation. I considered canceling, but decided facing the situation directly was better than prolonging it. I brought a bottle of wine as a peace offering, though I harbored no illusions about how the evening would unfold. As I parked outside my parents' suburban home, I noticed several other cars already there. My aunt and uncle's SUV, my cousin's sedan, even my grandmother's car, with its distinctive bumper stickers. This wasn't going to be a small family dinner. It was a full family gathering. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother embraced me with the stiff formality she reserved for when she was upset but trying to appear welcoming. "Everyone's in the living room," she said, taking the wine without comment. The living room fell silent as I entered. Rebecca sat in the center of the sofa, positioned like the guest of honor. My father stood by the fireplace. My aunt and uncle occupied the love seat, and various cousins were scattered around the room. Grandmother sat in her favorite armchair, her expression unreadable behind thick glasses. "There he is," my father announced with forced joviality, the man of the hour. I greeted everyone, trying to gauge the mood. Some family members seemed uncomfortable, suggesting they knew what was planned. Others, like my cousin Andrea, offered sympathetic smiles. Dinner proceeded with artificial pleasantness. Everyone avoided the obvious topic, instead discussing weather, local news, and distant relatives' activities. My mother had indeed prepared my favorite foods, her lasagna with extra cheese, garlic bread, and roasted vegetables. The effort felt manipulative rather than loving. After dinner, as we moved back to the living room, my father disappeared briefly. He returned carrying a cake with lit candles. "We know your birthday isn't until next month," he announced, "but since the whole family is here, we thought we'd celebrate early." The cake was chocolate with vanilla frosting, my favorite since childhood. As they began singing Happy Birthday, confusion mixed with suspicion. My birthday was 5 weeks away, and we'd never celebrated it early before. The cake was placed before me. "Make a wish," my mother urged. Before I could blow out the candles, my father raised his glass. "I'd like to make a toast to Nestor. 32 years old next month, successful career, beautiful apartment. We're all proud of what you've accomplished, son." A murmur of agreement circled the room. I waited for the other shoe to drop. "Family is what makes all success meaningful," he continued, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality. "We support each other through good times and bad. When one of us struggles, others step in to help. That's what makes us strong as a family." My mother nodded emphatically. "Some of us have been blessed with more than others. It's our responsibility to share our blessings." The ambush was unfolding exactly as I'd expected. I remained silent, watching this performance play out. "Your sister has hit a rough patch," my father continued. "As her brother, you're in a unique position to help. That second bedroom, sitting empty, while Rebecca needs a home." "It's not empty," I interjected. "It's my office. I use it daily for work." The room tensed at my interruption. "A desk can go anywhere," my Aunt Judith offered. "When I was starting out, I worked from my kitchen table." Rebecca seized the opportunity. "I've lost everything, Nestor," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Tyler left me with nothing. The landlord kept my security deposit. I'm staying on people's couches, carrying my life in suitcases." She gestured to our assembled relatives. "Everyone here has helped me, except you." The accusation hung in the air. "That's not true," I said evenly. "I've offered to help you find an apartment, to loan you money for a deposit, to be your reference with landlords. You've refused all of those offers because you only want one thing, my home." "It's just temporary," my mother insisted, though we all knew better. "How temporary?" I asked. "A month? 6 months? A year? When has anything with Rebecca ever been temporary?" Rebecca gasped at the implied criticism, and several relatives shifted uncomfortably. "You have the means to help your sister," my father said firmly. "We're simply asking you to be generous." "I am being generous with what's mine to give," I replied. "My time, my assistance, even my money. But not my home. I worked for years to afford that apartment." I don't owe it to anyone. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. So you're refusing to help your family? My mother asked, her voice rising. I'm refusing to give up my home, I clarified. I've offered multiple forms of help that Rebecca has rejected. Rebecca began crying more intensely. I knew you didn't care about me. You've always resented me. That's not true, I said, maintaining my composure. But I'm not going to be manipulated into giving up what I've worked for because you refuse to take responsibility for your own life. The word manipulated acted like a match to gasoline. My father's face reddened. How dare you? He shouted. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked quietly. You paid for Rebecca's college, I worked through mine. You bail Rebecca out whenever she's in financial trouble I've managed on my own. You bought Rebecca a car for her 16th birthday I saved for 3 years to buy my first used car. The room fell silent at this cataloging of disparities. We raised you, my mother said, as if that settled everything. Yes, you did. And you taught me to work hard for what I want. That's exactly what I've done. Why is Rebecca exempt from that lesson? Rebecca stood up suddenly. You think you're so perfect. Not everyone can be like you, Nestor. I don't expect you to be like me, I replied. I expect you to be an adult who takes responsibility for her own life instead of expecting others to sacrifice for her. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the cake jump. Enough. This selfish attitude stops now. Your sister needs you, and you're turning your back on her. What kind of man have you become? A self-sufficient one, I answered. Which is what I thought you wanted. My mother was crying now, making me the villain who had upset her. After all these years, after all we've sacrificed for you. What sacrifices, Mom? Name one thing you've sacrificed for me that compares to what you've done for Rebecca. She couldn't answer. I think it's time you reconsidered your priorities, son, my father said coldly. Family comes first. Always. I agree, I said, standing up. But family doesn't mean one person always gives, while another always takes. That's not family, that's exploitation. My father's face contorted with rage. Before I realized what was happening, he grabbed the cake and thrust it toward my face. Chocolate frosting smeared across my cheeks and nose, pieces falling onto my shirt and the carpet. If you won't help your sister, he shouted, then you're no son of ours. You're dead to us. The room froze in shocked silence. Even Rebecca seemed stunned by the escalation. Cake dripped from my face onto my clothes as I stood there, humiliation burning through me. My grandmother's voice cut through the tension. Thomas, what have you done? She addressed my father, her voice quavering with age and emotion. I didn't wait for his answer. Without a word, I walked to the door, cake still clinging to my face and shirt. As I reached for the doorknob, my mother called out, Nestor, wait. Your father didn't mean. But I was already gone, the door closing behind me on a family scene that would be forever changed. The drive home passed in a blur. At traffic lights, I caught glimpses of my reflection cake frosting drying on my skin, the absurdity of a grown man wearing dessert, making the humiliation even more acute. By the time I reached my apartment building, the shock had worn off enough for embarrassment to set in. I kept my head down in the elevator, grateful none of my neighbors were present. Inside my apartment, I stood in the entryway for a long moment, keys still in hand. This home, which had represented my achievement and independence, now felt tainted by family conflict. I moved to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. Chocolate smeared across my face, vanilla frosting in my hair, a grown man wearing the evidence of his family's rejection. As I showered, watching cake and frosting swirl down the drain, the emotional dam broke. Tears mixed with water, silent at first, then building to racking sobs that echoed against the shower tiles. Years of unequal treatment, of being taken for granted, of being expected to sacrifice while Rebecca was coddled, it all poured out in waves of grief and anger. I called in sick to work on Monday, something I'd rarely done before. The thought of explaining my puffy eyes and distracted demeanor was too much to face. Instead, I sat in my living room, staring at my phone as notifications accumulated. 12 missed calls from my mother. 5 from my father. Multiple texts from Rebecca, oscillating between anger and tearful pleas. Messages from relatives who had witnessed the scene, some apologetic, others doubling down on my supposed selfishness. By Tuesday, I had to return to work, but concentration proved impossible. My boss, Sandra, called me into her office again. "Whatever's going on in your personal life is affecting your work, Nestor. I need to know if this is temporary or if we have a problem." Her directness was exactly what I needed. Family issues, I admitted. "It came to a head this weekend, but I'm working through it. I just need a few days to get my focus back." "Take tomorrow off," she suggested, surprising me with her understanding. "Get your head straight. But when you come back Thursday, I need the old Nestor back." That unexpected day off became a turning point. Rather than wallow in emotional turmoil, I used the time to seek perspective. I met my colleague Jasmine for coffee, someone I respected for her emotional intelligence and directness. After hearing my story, she didn't offer the automatic but their family response I'd come to expect. Instead, she asked questions that cut to the heart of the dynamic. "Has this pattern existed your whole life? You giving, Rebecca taking?" "Pretty much," I admitted. "And what happens when you don't give?" "Exactly what you saw: emotional manipulation, guilt-tripping, eventually rage." Jasmine nodded. "That's not family supporting each other, Nestor. That's a dysfunctional system maintaining itself. You've disrupted the system by setting a boundary, and the system is fighting back hard." Her framing helped me see the situation with clinical clarity rather than just emotional hurt. This wasn't about an apartment. It was about a lifetime of established roles that I was finally challenging. That evening, I began researching family dynamics and emotional manipulation. Terms like golden child and scapegoat seemed to describe Rebecca's and my positions perfectly. I read about enabling behavior, about how families can unconsciously designate roles that become cemented over decades. The more I read, the more I recognized my family's patterns. I started a document, cataloging incidents throughout my life where this dynamic had played out: the unequal celebration of achievements, the disparate financial support, the constant expectation that I would be the responsible one while Rebecca faced no such expectations. Seeing it all written out in black and white was both validating and deeply saddening. By Friday, I'd made an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Hoffman specialized in family dynamics, and our first session proved revelatory. "What you're describing is quite common in families," he explained. "One child becomes designated as self-sufficient and is then expected to remain in that role, while another is viewed as needing help and thus perpetually receives it. Breaking these patterns is difficult because they're comfortable for everyone except the designated giver." "How do I change it?" I asked. "By doing exactly what you've already started, setting clear boundaries and refusing to participate in the established dynamic. It will be uncomfortable, even painful. The system will push back hard, but if you remain consistent, one of two things will happen. Either the system will adjust to your new boundaries, or you'll need to create distance to protect yourself." Over the next 2 weeks, I continued therapy while maintaining radio silence with my family. The missed calls and messages gradually tapered off as they realized I wasn't responding. The space allowed me to strengthen my resolve and develop a strategic plan for addressing the situation on my terms. I decided that any resolution would require evidence and documentation, not just emotional appeals. I compiled a spreadsheet detailing the financial disparities between Rebecca's support and mine throughout our lives, from college tuition to bailouts to gifts. The numbers were stark when viewed comprehensively. I wrote a formal letter explaining my position, not as an emotional reaction but as a reasoned response to years of inequality. I practiced articulating my boundaries with Dr. Hoffman, preparing for the inevitable pushback. An unexpected development occurred 3 weeks after the cake incident. My Uncle Frank, my father's brother, called me directly. "I've stayed out of this mess," he said gruffly. But what happened at that dinner wasn't right. Your father went too far. His support surprised me. Thanks for saying that. Look, I've watched this dynamic with Rebecca for years. Your parents have been enabling her dependence since she was a teenager. It's not helping her, it's crippling her. Try telling them that, I said. Someone should, he replied. And maybe that someone is you. But you need to be strategic about it. His advice aligned with what I'd been planning, a direct confrontation, but one based on facts rather than emotions, with clear boundaries for moving forward. The final catalyst came unexpectedly. My building security system captured video of Rebecca attempting to use a spare key to enter my apartment while I was at work. I had forgotten she still had the emergency key I'd given her when she first stayed over. The footage showed her trying the lock, then making a phone call, presumably to our parents when it didn't work. I'd changed the locks after the cake incident, then leaving frustratedly. This attempted boundary violation confirmed I was making the right decision. With evidence of the financial disparities, a clear articulation of my position, the security footage, and the support of both my therapist and, unexpectedly, Uncle Frank, I was ready to confront my family. I scheduled the meeting for neutral territory, a private room at a local restaurant, where we could speak without creating a public scene. I sent formal invitations to my parents, Rebecca, and Uncle Frank, making it clear this was not a social gathering, but a necessary discussion about our family's future relationship. The stage was set. After nearly a month of silence, I would face my family and establish new terms for our relationship moving forward. I was nervous, but resolute. The old dynamic was dead. Whether a new, healthier one could emerge remained to be seen. Preparation became my anchor in the days leading up to the family meeting. Each evening after work, I refined my approach, organizing evidence and rehearsing key points. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about clearly establishing boundaries that would either transform our family dynamic or define its limitations. My first strategic step was consulting a financial advisor. I wanted to understand what responsible help for Rebecca might actually look like, beyond the enabling pattern my parents had established. Lisa, a certified financial planner, reviewed Rebecca's situation based on the information I provided. Your sister needs a financial reset, she concluded. Short-term housing assistance makes sense, but coupled with financial literacy education and a strict budget. Without addressing the underlying spending habits, any help just perpetuates the cycle. Lisa helped me develop a potential support plan that would offer Rebecca genuine help toward independence rather than dependence. This would be my counteroffer to my parents' demand that I surrender my apartment. Next, I organized my documentation chronologically, creating a clear narrative of the family's differential treatment over time. I didn't want to seem petty, listing every birthday gift disparity from childhood, so I focused on major financial support: college tuition, mine partially self-funded, hers fully covered; housing support, none for me, regular bailouts for her; emergency assistance, none for me, multiple instances for her. I also compiled evidence of my own financial responsibility: my mortgage approval showing excellent credit, my consistent retirement contributions, the absence of credit card debt. These weren't points to brag about, but to establish that I had earned my stability through careful choices, the very lessons my parents claimed to value but never required of Rebecca. The security footage of Rebecca attempting to enter my apartment was downloaded to my phone. I hesitated about using this evidence. It felt somewhat confrontational, but Dr. Hoffman encouraged me to include it. This isn't about embarrassing Rebecca, he explained during our session. It's about demonstrating concrete boundary violations. Without specific examples, family disputes often devolve into he said, she said, arguments where nothing gets resolved. I practiced my opening statement repeatedly, refining it to be clear and factual without sounding accusatory. I've called this meeting because I want to address the conflict about my apartment directly and establish clear boundaries moving forward. I love all of you, but the current expectations are damaging our relationship in ways that will be hard to repair if we don't change course. Uncle Frank called the night before the meeting. Have you heard from your parents? He asked. Only a text confirming they'll be there. Nothing from Rebecca. He sighed. They're coming in hot, Nestor. Your mother's been calling around the family, saying this meeting is about you apologizing and making things right. Rebecca's told several cousins you're going to announce you're giving her the apartment. This wasn't surprising, but it was disappointing. They're setting themselves up for disappointment. Yes, they are. But listen, I've been thinking about my role tomorrow. Do you want me to mediate, or am I there as support for you? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't really defined it. I guess I saw you as a neutral third party, someone both sides respect. I can do that, he agreed. But just so we're clear, I think you're right in this situation. Your parents have created a monster with Rebecca, and someone needs to break the cycle. I'll try to be neutral tomorrow, but if things get out of hand, I won't sit silent. His support strengthened my resolve. Thank you, Uncle Frank. That means a lot. The morning of the meeting, I woke early despite having slept poorly. I reviewed my notes one final time, dressed in business casual attire. Psychology articles suggested dressing professionally for difficult conversations to establish authority, and arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early to ensure everything was arranged properly. The private dining room I'd reserved was small but comfortable, with a round table that avoided creating physical sides. I'd ordered a simple tea and coffee service, but no food. This wasn't meant to be a social gathering, and I wanted no distractions. Uncle Frank arrived first, giving my shoulder a supportive squeeze before taking his seat. My parents entered next. My mother's eyes reddened as if she'd been crying, my father's posture stiff with defensiveness. Rebecca came last, wearing an expression that fluctuated between defiance and victimhood. Thank you all for coming. I began once everyone was seated. I know the last few weeks have been difficult. Difficult is an understatement, my mother interrupted. You've broken this family apart, Nestor. I hope you're prepared to make amends. I took a deep breath, remembering Dr. Hoffman's advice not to get pulled into emotional reactions. I understand you're upset, Mom. That's why I wanted to meet face to face, to address what happened and find a way forward. The way forward is simple, my father stated flatly. Family helps family. Your sister needs a place to stay. I agree that family should help family, I replied, maintaining eye contact. But the current expectation isn't about helping. It's about enabling patterns that aren't healthy for any of us, including Rebecca. Rebecca scoffed. Here we go with the psychobabble. Please, let me finish, I said firmly. I've prepared some information I'd like us all to consider. I distributed copies of the financial comparison I'd prepared, showing the stark disparities in family support between Rebecca and me over the years. What's this supposed to be? My father demanded, barely glancing at the document. It's a factual record of the financial support each of us has received from you over the years, I explained. I'm not sharing this to complain, but to illustrate a pattern that's developed. My mother pushed the paper away. We helped both of you as needed. Rebecca needed more help. That's what parents do. But there's a difference between help and dependence, I countered. At 31, Rebecca has never been financially independent because she's never had to be. Each time she faces consequences for her choices, someone steps in to shield her. Rebecca's face flushed. That's not fair. I've had bad luck. It's not bad luck when it's a consistent pattern, I said gently. Tyler left because of arguments about your spending habits, the same issue that's caused problems in your last 3 relationships. You've been fired twice for attendance problems. These aren't random misfortunes. They're consequences of choices. How dare you speak to your sister that way? My father growled. Uncle Frank cleared his throat. Thomas, let him finish. We agreed to listen to each other. Remember? My father subsided, though his expression remained thunderous. I want to address what happened at the birthday dinner, I continued. Dad, you called me selfish, threw cake in my face, and said I was dead to you all because I wouldn't give up my home to Rebecca. Can you understand how disproportionate that response was? My father shifted uncomfortably, but remained defiant. You were turning your back on family. No, I was setting a reasonable boundary. I offered multiple forms of help that Rebecca rejected because she only wanted one thing: my apartment. "It's just temporary," Rebecca insisted, though less convincingly than before. "Is it?" I asked, holding her gaze. "How long were you planning to stay?" She looked away without answering. "There's something else you should see," I said, taking out my phone and pulling up the security footage. I placed it in the center of the table and pressed play. The video clearly showed Rebecca attempting to use a key at my apartment door, then making a phone call when it didn't work. Rebecca's face drained of color. My mother gasped. "You tried to enter my home without permission while I was at work," I stated, after I'd explicitly said no. "What was your plan if the key had worked?" Rebecca stammered. I needed to measure the office to see if my furniture would fit." The admission confirmed what I'd suspected: she had planned to move in regardless of my consent. "This is the pattern I'm talking about," I said, addressing my parents directly. "Rebecca decides what she wants, ignores boundaries, and expects everyone to accommodate her. And until now, you've reinforced this by pressuring me to give in." My father's anger seemed to deflate somewhat in the face of the evidence. My mother looked between Rebecca and me, confusion replacing her earlier certainty. "I have a proposal," I said, moving to the constructive phase of my plan. "I've consulted with a financial advisor about how to help Rebecca in ways that promote independence rather than dependence." I distributed copies of the support plan I'd developed with Lisa. It included 1. 3 months of rental assistance for a studio apartment within Rebecca's budget. 2. Financial literacy education. I would pay for the course. 3. A budget plan Rebecca would need to follow to receive the assistance. 4. Monthly check-ins with the financial advisor to ensure progress. "This is real help," I explained. "Not a band-aid that postpones the inevitable, but support that addresses the underlying issues." Rebecca stared at the document, her expression unreadable. "And what if we refuse this plan?" my father asked, though his tone lacked conviction. "Then I can't be part of enabling Rebecca anymore," I said firmly. "My boundary is clear. I will help, but I won't surrender my home or my financial stability. If that's unacceptable to you, then we need to redefine our relationship moving forward." The ultimatum hung in the air. Uncle Frank, who had remained mostly silent, finally spoke. "Thomas, Mary," he addressed my parents. "I've watched this situation develop for years. You've always had good intentions, but the result speaks for itself. Rebecca isn't independent at 31 because she's never needed to be. Nestor's offer is more than generous. It's actually what she needs." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We just wanted to help her." "I know," I said gently. "But sometimes what feels like help actually hurts in the long run. Real help means supporting growth, not dependence." Rebecca remained silent, staring at the support plan. "I love all of you," I continued. "I want us to be a family. But a healthy family respects boundaries and supports each other in ways that foster independence, not codependence. These are my terms for moving forward." The silence that followed wasn't hostile as I'd feared, but thoughtful. For perhaps the first time, they were truly considering another perspective. The restaurant's private room felt charged with tension as my family absorbed the evidence and proposal I'd presented. My father broke the silence first, his voice quieter than his usual confident tone. "You went to a lot of trouble to prepare all this," he observed, gesturing to the documents. "Is our relationship really worth so little that you need spreadsheets and videos to talk to us?" The question surprised me, with its vulnerability beneath the defensiveness. "It's because our relationship is worth so much that I did this," I replied. "Emotional conversations about this topic haven't worked. We talk in circles, with the same expectations and the same results. I needed to show you the pattern clearly, so we can break it." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "We never meant to be unfair, Nestor. We just saw Rebecca struggling, and you succeeding. It seemed natural to help the child who needed it more." "I understand that intention," I acknowledged. But the result has been that Rebecca never developed the skills to succeed on her own, while I was expected to manage without support. That imbalance has shaped our entire family dynamic. Rebecca had been unusually quiet, studying the financial support plan I'd proposed. Finally, she looked up, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and defiance. "This plan makes me look like a child who can't handle money," she said, pushing the paper away. "The evidence suggests you struggle with financial management," I replied evenly. "That's not a judgment, it's a skill that can be learned. But pretending the problem doesn't exist hasn't worked. So I'm just supposed to live in some tiny studio while you have your fancy two-bedroom?" The familiar note of entitlement crept back into her voice. "Yes," I said simply, "because I've earned my apartment through years of hard work and responsible choices. You have the opportunity to build your own stability, and I'm willing to help you do that. But I won't give you what I've earned, because you want to skip the process of earning it yourself." Uncle Frank leaned forward. "Rebecca, let me ask you something. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "I don't know. Hopefully with a better job. Maybe my own place." "And how will you get there?" he pressed. "What's your plan?" Her silence was telling. "That's the heart of this issue," I explained. "Without a plan for independence, temporary help becomes permanent dependence. My proposal offers a pathway to the future you say you want." My father, who had been quietly reviewing the financial comparison I'd provided, looked up with an expression I rarely saw from him: uncertainty. "These numbers." I knew we helped Rebecca more, but seeing it laid out like this, he shook his head. I didn't realize the disparity was so significant. This admission felt like a breakthrough. For the first time, he was seeing the situation from a perspective other than his own. "We were trying to be good parents," my mother added defensively. "Different children have different needs." "That's true," I agreed. "But when one child receives consistent support while the other is expected to be self-sufficient, it creates resentment and damages relationships. I don't resent helping Rebecca. I resent the expectation that I should sacrifice my own stability to compensate for choices she's made." I turned to Rebecca directly. "I love you. You're my sister. But loving you doesn't mean giving you whatever you want, regardless of the consequences. Real love sometimes means saying no and offering help that addresses the real problem." Tears welled in her eyes, not the manipulative tears I'd seen before, but something that seemed more genuine. "You make it sound so simple," she whispered. "It's not simple," I acknowledged. "Breaking patterns never is. But it's necessary if we want different results." My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. "So what exactly are you proposing for our family moving forward?" "Boundaries and accountability," I replied. "I'm willing to help Rebecca according to the plan I've outlined, but not by giving up my apartment. I'm willing to rebuild our relationship, but not if it means returning to the old dynamic where I'm expected to sacrifice while Rebecca is enabled." "And if we don't agree?" he challenged, though with less conviction than before. "Then we'll need space from each other while you decide what's more important, maintaining the current dynamic or having a relationship with me." The ultimatum hung in the air. My mother began crying in earnest. "You're tearing this family apart," she sobbed. Uncle Frank spoke up. "Mary, I think it's more accurate to say the family was already damaged. Nestor is just bringing the problems into the open where they can be addressed." "Frank, stay out of this," my father warned. "No, Thomas, I won't. I've watched this situation for years without saying anything. That ends today." He turned to my mother. "Mary, think about what you're asking. You want one child to give up his home so the other doesn't have to face the consequences of her choices. How is that fair or reasonable?" My mother had no answer. Rebecca pushed back from the table suddenly. "This is humiliating. You're all talking about me like I'm some kind of failure." "You're not a failure," I said gently. "But you are at a crossroads. You can continue the pattern that hasn't worked, or you can try something different that might lead to the independence you say you want." "By living in some tiny apartment with your charity?" she sneered. By taking the first steps toward building your own life instead of trying to take pieces of mine, I corrected. Something in my calm persistence seemed to finally penetrate her defenses. Her shoulders slumped slightly. I don't know if I can do it, she admitted, vulnerability breaking through her usual facade. You can, I assured her. But not if we all keep pretending the problem is circumstantial bad luck rather than choices and patterns. My father, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. Nestor, I owe you an apology for what happened at the dinner. Throwing the cake, saying you were dead to us, that was inexcusable, regardless of the disagreement. The apology, though limited to the cake incident rather than the broader pattern, was still surprising coming from my proud father. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. I still think you could do more to help your sister, he added, unable to fully concede. I'm offering what I believe is truly helpful, I responded. Not what's easiest or most comfortable, but what addresses the real issues. That's what families should do, help each other grow, not enable each other's problems. As the meeting approached its second hour, it became clear that while no immediate consensus had been reached, perspectives had shifted. My mother's certainty about my selfishness had been replaced with uncomfortable reflection. My father's authoritarian stance had softened somewhat, and Rebecca, though still resistant, was confronting realities she'd long avoided. I need time to think about all this, she finally said. That's fair, I agreed. The offer stands. Think about what kind of future you want, and whether the path you're on will get you there. As we prepared to leave, the tension had transformed from hostile confrontation to uncertain truce. No one was entirely comfortable with the new landscape I'd created, but the old certainties had been disrupted. It wasn't resolution, but it was a beginning. Nestor, my mother said as we stood to leave, will you come for Sunday dinner next week? Just to talk, no pressure about the apartment. The invitation represented a small but significant shift, an acknowledgement that our relationship could continue, even without my capitulation. I'd like that, I replied. Thank you. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, Uncle Frank clasped my shoulder. You did well in there. Don't expect miracles overnight, but you've planted seeds that needed planting a long time ago. I watched my family members walk to their separate cars, each lost in thought. Whatever happened next, the dynamic had shifted. I had established my boundaries clearly and offered a path forward that respected both my needs and Rebecca's growth. Whether they would accept that path remained to be seen, but I had done what I needed to do. The old pattern was broken. Something new would have to take its place. 3 weeks of silence followed our restaurant confrontation. No calls from my parents, no texts from Rebecca, nothing from the extended family who had been so vocal before. The absence of communication was both relieving and concerning. Had I permanently damaged these relationships? Or was this the necessary quiet before a new beginning? I focused on rebuilding my routine during this time. Work performance improved as the family stress receded. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the conflict. My apartment, once a source of contention, became my sanctuary again, as I added small touches, new artwork, comfortable reading chair, herb garden on the kitchen windowsill. Dr. Hoffman helped me navigate this uncertain period. Silence doesn't necessarily mean rejection, he explained during our session. It often means people are processing. You've challenged fundamental assumptions about your family system. That takes time to integrate. On the 23rd day after our meeting, my phone rang with my father's number. I took a deep breath before answering. Hello, Dad. Nestor. His voice sounded different, hesitant, lacking its usual authority. Do you have a few minutes to talk? The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd had before. My father, a man who rarely admitted error, acknowledged that he'd been thinking about everything I'd said. I've been looking back at how we've handled things with you and Rebecca, he said. I still think we were trying to do the right thing, but I can see now that the results weren't what we intended. The admission, though carefully worded to preserve some pride, represented a significant shift. I appreciate you saying that, I replied, careful not to push too hard on this fragile new ground. Your mother and I have been talking a lot, he continued. We'd like to meet with you, just us, not Rebecca if you're willing. 2 days later, we met at a small coffee shop, halfway between our homes. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, suggesting she'd been crying. My father looked tired, the lines in his face deeper than I remembered. We made mistakes, my mother said after we'd settled with our coffees. When you laid everything out that way at the restaurant, with the numbers and the history, we couldn't deny it anymore. We never meant to be unfair, my father added. Rebecca just always seemed to need more help, and you were so capable on your own. I understand that, I said gently. But capability doesn't mean I didn't need support too. It just meant I found ways to manage without it. We're sorry, Nestor, my mother said, reaching for my hand across the table. Truly sorry. For the cake incident, for pressuring you about the apartment, but mostly for the years of imbalance we didn't recognize. The apology, delivered without qualifications or excuses, washed over me like a healing balm. I hadn't realized how much I'd needed to hear those words until they were spoken. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. That means a lot to me. We've been talking to Rebecca too, my father continued. That's been challenging, I could imagine. Rebecca's identity had been built around being the one who received help, rather than the one who needed to change. She's angry, my mother admitted. First at you, then at us when we suggested she consider your proposal. But yesterday, something shifted. She asked to see those financial records again, the ones you showed us at the restaurant. This surprised me. What happened? She was quiet for a long time after reviewing them. Then she asked if it was really true that we'd paid her full college tuition while you worked through school. When we confirmed it, she got very upset, but not in her usual way. She seemed genuinely shocked, like she'd never realized the disparity before. Seeds of awareness were sprouting, it seemed. We've told her we'll help her find an apartment, my father added, but within her budget, not ours. And we've offered to pay for that financial literacy course you suggested. These were small but significant steps. How did she take that? Not well initially, my mother acknowledged. There were tears, accusations that we were abandoning her. But this morning she texted me a link to a studio apartment she's considering. It's the first time she's ever researched housing without being pushed. Progress, however tentative, was happening. Our meeting ended with cautious optimism and plans for a family dinner the following Sunday, including Rebecca. That dinner was awkward, as expected. Rebecca barely spoke to me directly, addressing her comments to our parents instead. But there was a notable absence of entitled demands or dramatic outbursts. When my mother mentioned the studio apartment Rebecca had found, she discussed it with a hint of pride I hadn't heard from her before. It's small, but it has good light for my plants, she said, revealing a practical consideration I wouldn't have expected from her. The weeks that followed brought gradual changes. Rebecca signed up for the financial literacy course, attending without having to be reminded. She secured the studio apartment with my parents, providing the security deposit as a one-time assistance. When I offered to help her move, she accepted without making comments about how much bigger my place was. 3 months after our confrontation, we gathered for Thanksgiving at my parents' house. The atmosphere remained somewhat strained, but noticeably improved from before. Uncle Frank, observing the changes, whispered to me, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself. You've started something important here. Rebecca approached me as I was helping clean up after dinner. I signed up for a budgeting app, she said, the first direct conversation she'd initiated with me in months, the one they recommended in that financial course. It's actually helping me track where my money goes. That's great, I replied, genuinely pleased. How's the apartment working out? It's small, she admitted, but it's mine. I'm learning to work with the space I have. The statement seemed to carry deeper meaning than just square footage. By the 6-month mark, family gatherings had established a new normal. The excessive favoritism toward Rebecca had moderated, though old habits occasionally resurfaced. When they did, I addressed them directly but gently, and my parents made efforts to correct course. Rebecca's journey toward independence progressed in fits and starts. She secured a stable administrative position at a law firm, maintained her apartment beyond the 3 months of assistance I'd offered, and gradually reduced her credit card debt. There were setbacks: an impulsive weekend trip that strained her budget, a parking ticket she expected our parents to pay, but the overall trajectory moved toward greater responsibility. My relationship with my parents deepened in unexpected ways. With the unspoken resentments now addressed, we found new ground for connection. My father began asking about my architectural projects with genuine interest, rather than obligatory politeness. My mother and I started a tradition of monthly lunches where we discussed everything from books to politics to family history. The most profound change, however, occurred within me. Setting and maintaining boundaries had transformed more than just my family relationships. It had altered how I navigated all relationships in my life. I became more direct about my needs at work, leading to better project assignments and eventually a promotion. I developed deeper friendships based on mutual respect rather than my tendency to overgive. I even started dating again, approaching romantic relationships with clearer expectations. 1 year after the cake incident, I hosted a housewarming party in my apartment, the same apartment I'd refused to surrender. My parents attended, bringing a bottle of wine and conversation free from undercurrents of manipulation. Rebecca came with her new boyfriend, a sensible accountant, who seemed to appreciate her growing responsibility. She brought me a small plant for my office, a tacit acknowledgement of the space's purpose and my right to maintain it. As my guests mingled and laughed around me, I found myself reflecting on the journey. The confrontation had been painful but necessary. By refusing to perpetuate unhealthy patterns, I had created space for something healthier to emerge. It hadn't been easy for any of us, but the difficult path had led to growth that would have been impossible otherwise. The deepest lesson I learned through this experience was that true family support isn't about giving people what they want, it's about supporting what they need to grow. Sometimes love looks like standing firm rather than giving in. Sometimes the most caring thing we can do is to stop enabling behaviors that keep others dependent. And sometimes, the boundaries we set not only protect us, but create the necessary conditions for others to develop their own strength. My apartment, once the focal point of family conflict, had become a symbol of healthy boundaries and new beginnings. As I looked around at the gathered people, family, and friends navigating new relationship terrain with greater awareness, I realized that by refusing to give up my physical space, I had created the emotional space for all of us to become better versions of ourselves. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who didn't understand them at first? I'd love to hear how you handled similar situations. Please share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might be struggling with family boundaries. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand firm in what you know is right. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage in your own journey toward healthier relationships.